Years ago, I watched a silly movie by Steve Martin called Bowfinger, and Eddie Murphy was in that movie. And his character was feeling like he was being followed all the time, in which indeed he was, because Steve Martin was trying to make a movie using Eddie Murphy's character, who was like an action hero. But he couldn't afford to hire Eddie Murphy, so he just kept staging scenes where he knew Eddie's character was going to be, and then they would shoot the scene. But Murphy's character was seeing these people look like they were following him. Anyway, as he was talking to his therapist, he was talking about how hard it was keeping everything together. And so I'll never forget, because in his own Eddie Murphy way, he said, keep it together, keep it together, keep it together, keep it together, keep it together. And Carl Jung has a quote saying, what you resist persists. So, of course, what he was trying to keep together, the more he tried to keep it together, the more unraveled everything became. And I say all that as a prelude to what I'm about to say now. A part of being me, at times, seems to be hypersensitive. And when I'm hypersensitive and I feel really vulnerable, I tend to weep a little bit more than usual. And so I feel that way today. There's so much going on in the world, so much going on in my life, in your lives, that I'm just kind of feeling all of it now, and I'm having to fight, just wanting to weep and cry. Now that's all well and good if I'm at home, trying to keep it together, keep it together, keep it together all by myself. But standing in front of a group of people, it's difficult. So I have learned over the years that when you say something out loud that's bothering you, it takes its power away. So I shall not try to resist being sensitive and weepy today, because it's a part of who I am. It tells me that something's going on that I need to take a look at. But if I have to be sensitive and weepy, I'm glad I'm here, because I know I'm among friends. So with that, I'm going to read from the Gospel of Luke, and this is his version of the Beatitudes, which we're much more familiar with in the Gospel of Matthew. So here's Luke's version of that. He went down with them and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples were there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem and from the coastal region around Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him, to be healed from their diseases. Those troubled by impure spirits were cured. And the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all. Looking at his disciples, he said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven. But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. And woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. And woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and you will weep. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for that is how their ancestors treated the false prophets." So this is Luke's version of the Sermon on the Mount. And what Luke is doing is he's describing what the eschatological age is going to be like. Eschatology, the study of end times. So during the Messianic age, basically the message is this: God's going to flip everything upside down. Those who are hungry now are going to be well fed. Those who are rich and full are going to be hungry. Those who are mourning and weeping now, it's going to flip it around. They will be the ones laughing and dancing, and those who are laughing and dancing now, they're going to be the ones who are going to be mourning and weeping. Another thing, too, that I think we need to take a look at is because words change meaning as culture evolves. So, for example, this morning, Chris said that she had cookies, and the first thing that came to my mind is that little message that you get when you're online. It says, "Are you going to accept the cookies," right? Thankfully, that's not the kind of cookies the children are going to get today. I'm very, very happy for them in that. So maybe a better word for blessed would be happy are those, or fortunate are those. And a better word for woe would be how terrible and how sorrowful. I came across a video the other day, and it's with Tom Hanks, who's just one of my most favorite people on the earth, right? He is a great actor, but he also seems to be an incredible human being. And it's a round table, and you can find them on his round tables on YouTube. And he's sitting at a table with some other actors and other artists, and they talk about different issues in life. And on this particular round table, he was talking to Robert De Niro, Shia LaBeouf, Adam Sandler, Jamie Foxx, and Adam Driver. Wow, what a combination. And this is an excerpt from that meeting. He says, Tom Hanks, growing up, I wish I would have known, this too shall pass. And he looked at all of his colleagues. And he says, do you feel bad right now? Do you feel pissed off? Do you feel angry? And of course, they're shaking their heads. And he said, this too shall pass. Then he looked at them and says, do you feel great? Do you feel like you have all the answers? Do you feel like everybody is finally getting you? And then you can see the looks on their faces as they know what's coming next, right? And he looked at them laughing and says, and this too shall pass. Then Tom says, time is your ally. And if nothing else, just wait. Just wait it out. That illustration from Mr. Hanks seems to fit perfectly where I am with this passage of Scripture today. Because life is about being in times of weeping and mourning and being hungry and being in poverty, and then it's about laughing and dancing and celebrating and being rich beyond measure. That's life. It happens to all of us. And as Jesus was teaching these powerful lessons, people from all over the region came around to see him. And it says in here that he was cleansing them and curing them of unclean spirits. And many of us, because of our literature and our movies, usually when we think of unclean spirits, we think of someone possessed by some kind of demon, right? There's got to be some kind of dramatic exorcism for that thing to come out of. As I look over my life and I see cured from unclean spirits, what that says to me is they were being cured from their toxic beliefs. I saw an article years ago, I don't know, Chet, maybe you'll be able to confirm it, and if it's not true, just don't discount it right now, just let me know after the service, but that 67% of illness is caused by unresolved emotional issues. Toxic beliefs about our life and about our world have power. And those beliefs shape who we are, and it shapes the world around us as well. So what can help us with the cure? I think these teachings help us to address toxic beliefs. When we're poor, we're vulnerable and open ourselves up to listening. And when we discover that we're hungry, we must ask ourselves, what are we hungry for? And when we find ourselves weeping, what is it going to take to make us laugh? And Jesus is using these Beatitudes to help us to see how to be in relationship not only with one another, but within ourselves. And Jesus shares with them that the reward is in heaven when they can somehow transcend and rise above life. Now, unfortunately, for millennia, religions have taught that heaven is a place you go after you die. And if you follow our religious code and our moral code, and you do everything just like we tell you to do, and believe exactly how we tell you to believe, then you've got your ticket to heaven. And if you don't, woe is you, because you're going to hell to burn on a spit, roasted over a fire for eternity, right? As it's coming out of my mouth, it sounds completely ridiculous. But think of how many of us have heard that and somehow bought into it, or maybe still buy into it now. Now, heaven. It's not a place where you go after you die, it's where you are right now. Jesus once taught, what you bind in heaven will be bound on earth. What you loose in heaven will be loosed on earth. The reality is, as we go through time, the Greek word chronos, chronological, it's linear time, a beginning, a middle, and then an end. We are all going to experience it at some time. We also experience kairos, which is an eternal time. And when Jesus announced to the people he was teaching, my time has come. It wasn't, oh, it's 6 o'clock. My time is now. No, my time, kairos. And what kairos in the Greek means is literally means an open window. So as we're living through chronos, sometimes the eternal opens a window for us to go through, and you have to go through it immediately, right? You have to, or you miss it, and you have to wait for the next time. But what I want to convey to you is that don't live your life in such a way that you think that if you do this or that, you're going to get to be in heaven. Heaven is now. As we are creatures on this planet, going about our lives with our successes and our failures and all the places in between, we are experiencing heaven or hell now. We're creating it for ourselves now, or we're creating hell for those around us now. The hell, you say? Yes. The hell, I say. Our reward is living consciously that who I am in chronos is who I am in an eternal realm as well. It's both and. It also has a thing on there, woe to you who are rich. When you think who is rich, we always think of what? Those who have a lot more than us, right? But I was told many years ago that if you had a choice of what to eat for breakfast this morning, for 3/4 of the world, you're rich. If you had a choice of what shoes to put on your feet this morning, you're rich, all right? So does Jesus hate rich people? I would say no. Because Joseph Arimathea, the one who gave him his private tomb when he was crucified, was a rich man. Mary of Magdala historically is believed to have been a very successful businesswoman in the fishing industry before Herod Antipas moved his business into town. And it was through her and other women that financed Jesus and his disciples' ministry. Is it because Jesus hates rich people? No. What I see in this is this. When we find ourselves at that place in life where we have much more than what we need, and we fall into that default belief system in which religion has been teaching us for millennia, is that when I have a lot, God loves me and God is blessing me. I'm a righteous man. And oh, you don't have anything? Well, it's your fault. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Work harder. There are people who work hard all their life and have nothing to speak of other than a shelter over their head, right? Not about hard work. What I see Jesus doing is if you find yourself at one of those times in life when you're not poor and hungry and you find you have more than you need, then share it with those who are poor and hungry. Because the day will come when it might flip itself around. When We were having our Bible study on the Beatitudes. David Housel brought this up, and David, I thank you for this, because I thought this insight for me just helped make that whole experience. He said, when we think of giving of our, letting someone borrow from us, and we give them whatever they ask without asking anything back, we often just see it in a financial arrangement. He said, but the biggest thing that we have that makes us rich beyond measure is our time. And when you see somebody who is asking for our time, give it to them. Look them in the eye. Listen to what they have. You don't have to try to fix them. Just be with them. That's what our Stevens ministry training is about. Am I right, Stevens ministers? You're not there to fix people. You are there to listen to them and be with them and let them know that, yes, I hear where you are right now is very hard and difficult, but you're not here alone. When I was in seminary, one of my favorite professors one day, as I was sitting on the bench looking over some notes, getting ready for class, my favorite professor, Dr. Max Rogers, was walking by, and I said, hello, Dr. Rogers, and he sat down next to me and just engaged in a conversation. He gave me his, what? His time. Jesus cured them of unclean spirits, and I believe part of those unclean spirits is our toxic beliefs. For those of us who are hungry, what are we feeding on? Does my life suck? Therefore, I'm going to feed on every negative thing that I can find on the internet because it's there. Plenty of it. On TV, internet. What is this? What's the saying? Misery loves. Yeah, you can find some other miserable people who will just make you feel even more miserable. Then you guys can feel great about your misery, right? My misery is justified. What are we feeding ourselves on? One of the things that concerns me about our current culture is this. We seem to be a culture of outrage. This particular athlete said to this particular athlete something, and now that particular athlete has responded back, and now everybody's outraged. I don't have time in my life to know what one professional athlete is saying about another. Do you? But yet, when you go on their Facebook and their Instagram, there it is, boom, all of it, all the outrage. Did you see what the Republicans did? I'm outraged. Everybody's outraged. Did you hear what the Democrats are doing? I'm outraged. Everybody is outraged. And what I'm learning is this. If we stay in a state of outrage all the time, then when something truly outrageous happens, then we're numb to it, right? Be careful about what you feed upon. Is it worth your time and your energy? So that when something outrageous does happen, then you have very clear vision about what that is as you share your outrage with others. Some people are going to persecute you. Some people are going to say mean things to you. Some people are going to do nasty things to you. Do we have to get outraged every time? One of my lovely mentors, Alan Nagel, told this story years ago, and I've never forgotten it. Alan has that way with people. He was telling it in context of the World Cup soccer match, and it was Italy and France. And they had used up all the overtimes, and now deciding who was going to be the World Cup champion was on I don't know soccer that well, but a kickoff. I think it's like each team gets 5 one-on-one, kicker and goalie, and the one that scores the most goals then wins. Only if life could be so simple. And the French team had a star player, a superstar player. And the fact that he was such a superstar gave them an advantage. But an Italian, a sly Italian, walked up to him right before he was to do his kick and said something about his sister. And the Frenchman was so outraged. It was outrageous, right? He headbutted him. And of course, the referees did not hear what the Italian said, but guess what they saw? A headbutt from the Frenchman to the Italian, and he was kicked out of the game, and France lost the match. Why was it that he gave all his power away to the Italian? And Alan used this in context of, if someone came up to me individually, not through social media or regular media, but if someone came up to me individually and said to me, your mom is a prostitute, Alan said, I wouldn't get mad at him for that, because I know it's not true. And what happens is when we get outraged by something somebody says, then we are giving our power away to that someone. Do you really want to give your power away to people like that? And what I see Jesus teaching us in this beatitude is there are always going to be people who are going to judge you and say horrible things about you, but if you know who you are, you don't have to respond with outrage. Rather, save your outrage for something that is truly, truly outrageous. But another thing that I have learned is that when we react profoundly to when someone says something that insults us, then maybe there's something back in our psyche that is thinking somehow what they just said is true. Right? Oh, really? I learned this lesson when I was working at Phoenix South for the Center for Drug-Free Living, and Ken was teaching us that when you're with your client and your client says something that you just want to walk across the room and slap them upside the head because you're so angry with them, then you need to slow yourself down, stick that in the back of your head, never let them know they got under your skin, because that's what they're trying to do. But then when you go home, you need to ask yourself this question: what was it about what they said triggered such a response in me? And if you do that, you might discover you have a toxic belief about yourself, and it seems that that particular person triggered that belief. Unclean spirit. Before I started my healing journey, I had a very low sense of self. And it seemed that I attracted people into my life who validated that low sense of self. Yep, it must be true because look at all the people around me. Show me, yep, that's true. And then as I started to heal and I started to transform, then an amazing thing happened. I seemed to be surrounded by people who are kind and loving and generous and spiritual and grounded. And they bring so much joy to my life. You see? Sometimes what needs to be healed in us is our toxic beliefs. When I asked the Bible study group, if you were to summarize the Beatitudes, how would you do it? And we had two responses. One was, be kind to people. Yeah, be kind to people. Be compassionate. And the other one was, these are words of hope. For if I'm poor, and I'm hungry, and I'm grieving, and I'm mourning, and I'm weeping, there's always hope. Because what? This too shall what? Shall pass. I came across some quotes, and I'm going to share them with you quickly because I see that this sermon for many of you may feel like it's never going to pass. So, but we're almost at the end, all right? I promise you, this too shall pass. All right. Oscar Wilde was such a wonderful, witty person who used crafted words in such great ways, and he's very quotable. He says, in this world, there are only two tragedies. One is not getting what one wants. And the other one is getting it. Then I came across this. The wonder of God's power to bless is that it happens regardless of our circumstances. It was Helen Keller, the blind, deaf, and mute, who triumphed over her disabilities, who wisely pointed out, although the world is full of suffering, it is also full of overcoming it. That's what the statue is, dance of transcendence, transcending suffering. God's way of blessing us sometimes is not to remove the cause of our complaint, but to give us the power to prevail over it. It's like the remark of the philosopher Ralph Waldo Emerson. It was the wounded oyster that mends its shell with what? A pearl. Who's to say what's a blessing and what's a curse in the great scheme of things? From our human perspective, what looks like the greatest calamities may, in God's eye view, really be our salvation. There's an old story, a true one, about a man who had a hard life. When he was 7 years old, his family was evicted from their home. When he was 9, his mother suddenly died. At 22, he lost his job as a store clerk. He had always wanted to go to law school, but his education wasn't good enough. He went into business instead, and at the age of 23, became a partner in a small store. 3 years later, his partner died, leaving a huge debt, which took him years to repay. At 28, he asked the woman he'd been courting for years to marry him, and she said, no. For a moment, his luck seemed to change. At age 37, he was elected to Congress on the first try. But then 2 years later, he was voted out. At age 41, his 4-year-old son died. At 45, he ran for the Senate and lost. At 47, he failed as vice presidential candidate. At 49, he ran for the U.S. Senate again and lost. Then, at age 51, he was elected President of the United States. His name was Abraham Lincoln. Some people just get all the breaks, right? So, do you feel poor and hungry right now? Do you feel persecuted and used and betrayed right now? This too shall pass. Do you feel happy, full of joy? Do you feel rich and you want to dance? Wonderful. But this too will pass. It seems that life is about mourning and laughing. It's about being rich and full. It's also about being poor and hungry. I came across this. It says it doesn't do us much good to count our blessings. And just listen to the rest of it, because I know some of you that's, count your blessings one by one, right? I think we sang about that this morning. Or blessed assurance, right? Nor does it help to, and this is important, count your misfortunes. The Bible in Romans 8:28 promises that all things work together for the good of those who love God. Somehow we've got to learn to trust that word. It is hard as it may be to do at times. When Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor and the hungry and those who weep," he's bearing witness to the truth that God is in charge of creation and that God isn't finished with us yet. God will inevitably bless us if we have faith. God may bless someday with what we most desire, or perhaps more likely, God may bless us through what we desire, but we don't even receive. It's not counting our blessings that is important. It's the blessing itself that counts. God's blessing that sojourns with us through wealth and poverty, health and sickness, laughter and tears. Praise to God for knowing us better than we know ourselves and for blessing us in every circumstance. We have many here who are givers and who are healers. And oh, what a wonderful blessing that is. But then there's a curse typically with people who are healers and givers. You know what that curse is? They haven't the capacity to receive kindness from others. They don't feel comfortable with it. I'll give you the shirt off my back. Will you try to give me your shirt? Oh, no, give it to somebody else who might need it more than me, right? In 2008 to 2010, I had my first rheumatic illness condition. And people in this congregation offered to help me in so many ways, and I turned them down. Why? Well, I think it was somewhat to do with the toxic belief that who I am really didn't matter that much, so that I don't deserve it. But after about 9 months, I realized I need help. And I made a promise to myself and to God. I will accept every invitation that anyone offers me to help me. And I did. I did. And it didn't matter how badly I felt at the time or whether it was in my schedule, if it seemed convenient. At times I just wanted to be at home alone. But I accepted every invitation. And during that time that I had that rheumatic condition, I received an incredible blessing. I discovered that the Windermere Union Church loved me. That you just didn't come to worship and you didn't listen to me because I'm your pastor. But you loved me. And when I opened myself up to receive that love, it transformed my life. When I put my ego aside and opened my soul, it transformed my life. And I shared with you in the past, and I share it again today. That's when I made a transition from being a pastor who loved his church to a pastor who was in love with his church. As I have looked at this passage, and I have dealt with it today, I have learned a powerful lesson in it. We're going to go through good and bad times, painful and happy times, rich and poverty times. We're going to. It's life. If you live long enough on this earth, you're going to experience all of those things. But what I have learned from this is, and this is what I needed to learn today, is the blessing is life itself. It's the blessing. And knowing that as we experience life, during the good and the bad, God's eternal blessing is always there. Hunger, poverty, weeping, mourning, pain, it too shall what? Pass. Wealth, laughing, dancing, celebration. What do we know? It too shall pass. But the blessing is eternal. The blessing of life is eternal. So if you find that you need to be cured of unclean spirits, allow these words to transform your heart. And know that blessings are eternal. Thus ends the lesson.